Welcome to Day 8 of our study of the book of Ecclesiastes. The title of today's lesson is For Everything There Is a Season. Our verses are found in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 through 11. For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven. A time to be born, and a time to die. A time to plant, and a time to pluck up what is planted. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to break down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to seek and a time to lose. A time to keep and a time to cast away. A time to tear and a time to sow. A time to keep silence and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time for peace. What gain has the worker from his toil? I've seen the business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, He has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. Socrates was quoted as having said, in the Greek language of course, "By all means marry. If you get a good wife, you'll become happy. If you get a bad one, you'll become a philosopher." Now, don't read too much into that quote. It doesn't mean that if you're married you can't or shouldn't think, or if you think too much that your marriage is in shambles. And I wonder if he were alive today what he might say about that quote. He might respond, "Of all the things I said, that's what you remember me for?" If you want to become entangled in a Gordian knot, so to speak, spend time looking into the different schools of philosophy and philosophers. In the New Testament, Paul crosses paths with the Epicurean and Stoic philosophers in Athens in Acts chapter 17. The writings of John and Peter in their letters suggest that a new school of thought threatening the early church was Gnosticism by their descriptions of such. If you are in the baby boomer category, you have grown up through modernism, described as a socially progressive trend of thought that affirms the power of human beings to create, improve, and reshape their environment with the aid of practical experimentation, scientific knowledge, or technology. Sometimes called the God is Dead movement, as depicted on the cover of the April 8, 1966 cover of Time magazine. Then along came postmodernism. Can be described as a set of critical, strategic, and rhetorical practices employing concepts such as difference, repetition, the trace, the simulacrum, and the hyperreality to destabilize other concepts such as presence, identity, historical progress, epistemic certainty, and the univocity of meaning. Thank you, Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, for that definition. We are fast approaching the next ism in this century, described by Dominic Basolto as altermodernism, defined also as meta-analysis, which gives way to collective transcritical imagination. Another modern philosopher, Alan Kirby, calls it the pseudo-modernism. For now, until there is an official name, we'll call it the post-postmodernism. And if you understand that cacophony of words slung together for definitions, I commend you. I've heard it put this way as it pertains to philosophy. Forget about world peace and visualize using your turn signal. So you see, there is a practical side to philosophy. Solomon seemingly departs momentarily from his thought process on vanity and a chasing after wind when he begins what we call chapter 3 of Ecclesiastes. However, this is a continuation of his last monumental declaration when he said in chapter 2, "There is nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God. For apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? For to the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom, knowledge, and joy. But to the sinner, he has given the business of gathering and collecting, only to give to one who pleases God. This also is vanity and a striving after wind." Don't worry, he'll return to vanity and such soon enough. But for now, Solomon interjects a poem of sorts with 14 comparisons, which he entitles generally under the heading of "For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven." Some have erroneously categorized these as fatalistic thinking or fate-based, perhaps under the title of the philosophy of fatalism, maybe theological determinism, or just plain determinism, or maybe even defeatism. In a very general sense, they describe it this way: any view according to which human beings are powerless to do anything other than what they actually do. Included in this is the belief that humans have no power to influence the future or indeed the outcome of their own actions. But is that really what Solomon is suggesting? That we have absolutely no control over our destiny? A sort of fait accompli? Notice that each of the 14 opposites, as it were, are that which falls under the realm of the human condition. Not that animals aren't born and then die, but each of these are a part of our lives to a greater or lesser extent. None of us has the option of choosing when we are born, and short of suicide, taking our own lives, our time of departure is unknown to us. Those are seasons or appointed times in this world. Just as there are appointed times for the next set, planting and plucking up. Those are pretty straightforward. If only it were that simple in the next step: killing and healing. We've already been made aware of the time to be born and the time to die. This, in this verse, is killing with intent, whether murder or of judicial punishment for crime. Whether we like it or not, whether we disagree or not, there is a season, an appointed time for that which is described by Solomon. In each of these listed, one may search the catalog of biblical authors to gain an understanding of what Solomon refers to in each of these. For so it is with Scripture. The Bible is the best interpreter of itself. As a whole, we may push forward into the New Testament to grasp a fuller understanding of that which Solomon wishes to grasp. We turn to the book of James, in James chapter 4, verses 13 through 17. "Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow, we will go into such and such a town, and spend a year there, and trade, and make a profit. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. So whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin." And consider Jesus' Sermon on the Mount in the Gospel of Matthew, chapters 5 through 7. This is perhaps the best commentary on these verses we are considering today in Ecclesiastes. One may indeed spend a lifetime sifting through the myriad of worldly philosophies, and in the end, scratch their heads in utter confusion and hopelessness. Yet, a lifetime spent searching the Scriptures brings answers if one has an honest heart and a willing mind to pursue truth. Consider Solomon's final words in our passage for consideration today in verses 10 and 11. "I have seen the business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, He has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end." Yes, God has somehow set eternity in our hearts, a way of contemplating our existence. But we shall leave that thought until tomorrow, when we'll consider what it means to have eternity within us. But for now, have you thought about the seasons of your life lately? And Lord willing, let's meet here again tomorrow and look at another lesson from the book of Ecclesiastes.